All right, you are recording.
All right, perfect. Thank you. I'd like to call the Land Use Review Board meeting to order for Wednesday, December 17th. I'm Sarah Had. I'm the vice chair. As Janet is absent today, I will be chairing the meeting. Perhaps other board members could go around and introduce yourselves. Brooke.
Brooke Dingledine.
Kirsten.
Kirsten Sultan. Hi, everyone.
And Alex.
Alex Weinhagen. Hello.
Do we have any public in attendance at 10 Baldwin?
No.
All right, and seeing none online, we'll move on from opportunity for public comment. We can come back to that if we like. And we'll move on to review of Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission draft response letter. And I will share my screen. Let me pull that up. All right, can everybody see that? All right, I'm getting some head nods. All right, so what I would ask for my fellow board members is, because I'm driving this and also running the meeting, I will not be able to see people's hands as well. So if I could have a board member speak up or let me know if I don't call on you, please do that. Going back, I'd like to backtrack a little bit on this discussion item from Monday. We had under C, conformance with outreach requirements. We had asked for legal to provide input in terms of wordsmithing our response. And this is the response here. We're changing it to, the board concludes that the plan was developed with and we're crossing off participation and we're saying involvement of the member municipalities, local citizens, and organizations, which allowed for meaningful participation, period, and deleting 4 communities throughout the region. Everybody's okay with that? I'll move on. Kirsten.
Yes, that addresses my question. Thank you.
Welcome. All right, is everybody okay? Look away if I'll make you motion sick and I'll get back to where we had left off under future land use. And under future land use, we had just briefly gone through the advisory recommendations, and this is for all of everything. And I think there was a discussion point that said we might want to come back and make some of these mandatory at the end. I think what we had on Monday was a good overview on this. So what I'd like to do is to keep on moving on and move into downtown centers and village centers, if that's all right, unless anybody has something else that they'd like to go back to first. All right, I'm not seeing any hands or hearing anything, so I'll continue on with downtown and village centers. And what you have here on page...
Sarah,
yes.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you if you could give us page numbers, because I'm looking at my own version and it's, different now that you've changed things. That would be really helpful.
Right. So this is page 15.
Didn't get that. Could you try it again?
Downtown centers and village centers. And this is the shell language that sort of gives a description as to what they are, what statute provides for. And then it gives a reference to the community investment program. And then the first bullet point is downtown centers. The next bullet point will be village centers. So we'll start with downtown centers. And we have the following downtown centers: Burlington Core, Burlington Cambrian Rise, Burlington South, Colchester, Essex, Essex Junction, Milton, Shelburne, South Burlington, Williston, and Winooski. So I'd like to start going through Burlington and the 3 different areas. We'll start with the core. And I can toggle back and forth to the map if you like as we go through these. But the core is around what's considered the traditional downtown of Burlington, Church Street, City Park. And we are saying that this meets the requirements for a downtown center. Moving on, there's the South Downtown, which is in the south end. And we are saying that does not meet the definition of a downtown. And then Cambrian Rise, we're also saying that is not consistent with the downtown. And what we're asking for required revisions on Burlington is to merge the south downtown center with the core, or have it be a planned growth area. And then with Cambrian Rise, we're saying to eliminate that as a downtown center and map it as infill, transition, or planned growth.
How definitive do we want to really be with these required revisions? I like specificity, but I also don't necessarily want to tell them exactly how to correct issues that we find conformance issues. And while the merger of the South Downtown Center with the core downtown center sort of makes sense to me, I know that at the meeting that came up and there was some discussion about portions of the Pine Street corridor having a robust history of discussion at the city level about the inclusion or lack thereof of residential allowances in a portion of the Pine Street corridor. And so I know the city has some history there. So all of this is my way of saying, like, should we be telling them to merge, or should we simply be saying, provide more information or consider changes to the downtown centers, or what do you think?
To answer your question, Alex, about how I approach this, and Janet has provided input on this plan. She can't be in attendance today. I do have some of her comments that I can go through. But specifically, I think it's good to talk in a sort of a broad overview, is CCRPC did ask for specificity where possible. And here, I think we're providing an either or scenario. I think that we're not dictating and trying to be a little more helpful rather than doesn't meet. So.
Okay. I'm not opposed to the specificity in this particular case. I just thought this was, we're just starting the conversation, so I may make this comment again in other municipalities, but okay.
All right, Brooke.
Yeah, well, I do object to it in this instance. I think that we're forgetting our role. Our role is to sit in judgment of these plans. And what that is somebody makes a proposal to us and we say yay or nay whether or not it complies. So there are two issues that I'd like to address. One is the language. I would like to see consistency throughout the entire document. And with regard to approving or not approving. So in terms of the first, the downtown Burlington, City of Burlington downtown center, we have said it meets the requirements. So the next one about the South Downtown Center should say it does not meet the requirements. It isn't consistent with. That is this wiggle language that I don't even know exactly what it means. Either they passed or they failed. Now, if they failed, it is not up to us to require revisions that then tell them how they could pass muster. That's called an advisory opinion.
So, Brooke, I'm going to just ask if I could just interject for a minute, because I think in the plan review, and speaking about how there's a legacy of plan review throughout the state of Vermont, where you have municipalities being reviewed by regional planning entities and what have you. I do believe that our process and what we heretofore as our board with the other two RPCs have had just exactly what's being proposed today in terms of, I don't believe that this is a varied process from that. And I think that we have provided comparable comments back and forth. So just, I want to be sensitive to your concern about legalities, but I also want to make sure that we don't ding ourselves for something that I think we're trying to provide consistency with.
Well, consistency with something that may not be quite right is not a reason to do something, in my opinion. I think, and regardless of what we've done, we know that we're building a plane while we're flying it. I do not believe it's appropriate to give somebody an advisory opinion about what would pass mass muster if they propose it. And I think what we say is this doesn't meet the standard. They are welcome to change that and alter it and come back to us with something different. But I don't think that this is our job. I don't think that our job is to tell them how to do it. It's to say whether or not what you're proposing is or is not correct. Just my opinion about it. I think we're going too far. And my concern is if we say, here's a required revision, and they don't do it the way that, we think is right or something. And they say, well, I merged the South Downtown Center with the thing, and I did it the way I thought you wanted it done, and you already said it could pass muster. And maybe this isn't a good example, but what I'm trying to do is make the point that this is for us to sit in judgment on, not to micromanage and tell them how to do it. And while I'm sure they appreciate a lot of the advisory suggestions, I think we have to be careful about what we're saying in terms of you will get a checked box if you do this, when in fact there might be 3 other ways that they could do it that we're not
Brooke,
talking about. So that's just my
what I would say
conceptual
is,
concern.
I think just to address that sort of head on is the overall approach to this was to, where possible, defer to the municipalities and to recognize the outstanding municipal planning that's gone on in Chittenden County and the collaboration, and to, where possible, provide some sort of open-endedness and not be too prescriptive. However, I think in discussing this and addressing Janet's concerns, is there are some times where you can't be too open-ended, where there aren't a world of possibilities, where something has to be one thing or another. And we're saying that it can't be this. And so that then whittles it down to, it needs to be, if it can't be A, it needs to be B or C. And to be explicit when we need to, but to otherwise defer and say, it's not A, you can figure it out. So I apologize that we're starting with sort of some of the tougher ones here. But I think hopefully as we get through the document, what you'll see is we've tried to give that deference to the RPC and municipalities to figure out where feasible. But just for me to encapsulate and sort of then address Kirsten, is, Brooke, what you would want to have happen is to remove the required revisions?
Yeah, my concern is, telling them that something's required, but, and they try to do so, but we're being too prescriptive, I guess, is maybe a way to try to describe my concerns. We're saying, oh, do X, but X has an awful lot of detail and information and stuff that could be understood as doing X. I
Brooke,
just don't want to give people the false impression that, they're going to get a check mark if they do this thing we're telling them to do. That's just not the way that applications work. They propose something, we say yes or no. We don't say no, but if you did X or Y, then we would say yes. And that's what I think this is. I think it's an advisory opinion that is not what courts or tribunals or quasi-judicial boards do, in my opinion.
I'm asking you to help me problem solve. What
What's
would
the
you like to
suggested
have
language,
happen?
Brooke? What would you like it to say, Brooke? Because I hear what you're saying, and I think Sarah's suggestion was, do you want to just delete the required revisions and leave the statement, with the first paragraph? Because that would be a solution to address your concern, I think.
Or something that Doesn't say the word required or, possible revisions, but I think that we just need to be very clear in our communication. That, there's a lot of detail involved here and this may or may not work. It depends on your proposal. That's the concept that I'm trying to protect. So we don't give unfair expectations that somebody is going to get an approval where we really haven't described much about what we're telling them to do.
I would disagree with that, but I think what I hear from you, just to try and summarize and move on to Kirsten, is you would like to have the required revisions be advisory.
That would be one way to resolve it. My concern, yeah. But I do think that area not consistent with language should just be the mirror image of not, doesn't meet the requirements.
So
Either
that's,
does or
that's
doesn't.
shell
meet the
language from our
requirements.
attorneys, so I don't feel comfortable revising that at this point. It would be inconsistent with the other two regional plans, but I think what I'd like to do is stick a pin in this, is to say that you would like to have the required revisions be changed to advisory, and hear what Kirsten has to say.
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Kirsten?
Yeah, so I had also felt this was quite prescriptive, and I think that I see that we have some staff from the Chittenden RPC with us today, and it strikes me that they can gain the benefit of some of this sort of advisory discussion, call it, around some possible solutions during a board meeting, and that we don't have to be so prescriptive. I think that we have been quite expansive with very detailed content within these plan reviews. And so I think that we should try to be more, concise in terms of defining either this does or doesn't meet. And sure, we can discuss it with the RPC, but I hesitate to define explicitly exactly what must occur in order to, get the plan to a pass. Like I said, I think they can get the benefit of that board discussion like that's happening right now.
So can I ask a question, I think, of the board? And
Yeah.
then I'd like to provide an opportunity for the RPC to weigh in, which is, so if we're saying that it doesn't meet, not providing specific recommendations when we have them, when we know. So I would agree. I think a lot of what we try to do was advisory in this, but there are certain times where something doesn't meet and it needs to be one thing or the other. And we know that. Is it disingenuous for us to not tell them then that it needs to be one thing or the other, and to just say, well, it's not this, but you can figure it out? I just feel like that's also to speak to our role and our responsibilities, is in order to help shepherd people through the process. And this is a pre-application that's meant to provide information as to what we're expecting in the application, how it'll be met. If we don't provide good guidance with how to meet when we know it, I feel like that's rather disingenuous of us. And I feel like in the other regional plans that we have provided specific required revision language. So I just want to make sure that we're being equitable. We're being as transparent as possible and forthright too. So, but Alex, what's your temperature on this?
I see it both ways. I think what's important is providing specificity as to our rationale when we make a determination that a future land use area doesn't meet the is not consistent with the statutory description. So I think the most important thing is to explain why we think that. I think it's actually less important to say, and here are the options for fixing it. I think that these folks at the Chittenden County RPC and all the rest are smart enough to figure that out, to know, okay, if it didn't meet the criteria for a downtown center, we need to work with the city to provide more information to convince the board that it should be that, or we need to change the designation. I don't think we need to instruct them how to do that. So I think the rationale is more important than the prescription. And if Brooke and Kirsten are uncomfortable with the specificity in this particular revision, specifically like merging the South Downtown Center with the core Downtown Center or changing it to a planned growth area, I'm happy to just jettison it and those required revision section entirely, or make them advisory and just move on. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
All right, Taylor.
A lot to take in. I'll do my best to be quick. I agree with Alex that understanding why an area doesn't meet statutory criteria is very important. Sarah, I very much appreciate trying to give us some breadcrumbs here under the heading of required revisions. But I hear Brooke's point. I wonder if I'm not a lawyer, but I wonder, like, could there be like a little like discussion kind of header here where we kind of like talk about, all right, with Cambrian Rise, it doesn't meet because XYZ reasons. You know, if RPC was going to pursue this in their final version, we would need to see XYZ. It's not being too specific about like you shall, if you do X, you get X, but it is a little breadcrumby. Any thoughts on that?
So I will say that once we get down below, you'll see that there are some more breadcrumb ones, but I think that let's discuss Cambrian Rise. That was something that was, I think, discussed in the pre-application. There are board concerns that this just does not meet the definition of a downtown at this point in time. And so I don't think that we can be breadcrumb in terms of giving like, well, if you do this or that, they're really, I don't think after the analyzing it, comments from board members, there are things that can be done to make that into a downtown. So I think that was part of the breadcrumbs was under required revision was it's not a downtown, but we'd accept that as transition, infill, or planned growth. The same thing with the south end is that by itself is not a downtown, but you could have it be part of that larger core downtown or have it as a planned growth. So I think that's where we're trying to be helpful, if you would. So does that help, Taylor?
Yeah, it helps me. I'm just trying to, what you have under required revisions is helpful. I guess it's up to the board about where they want to have that language is kind of what I'm getting to. I'm happy to talk about the actual centers too when you folks are ready, but it sounds like we're still having a discussion kind of about structure of the letter. So I'll hand it back to you guys to finalize that discussion.
Kirsten.
So just to mention, I agree with the content of what's currently listed under required revisions. I don't think we need the second bullet. I think it's sort of self-evident, like it's not consistent. That's all we need to say, or doesn't conform with the statutory requirements. And maybe instead of calling it required revisions or advisory recommendations, maybe we call it conceptual possible solution or discussion or something. Maybe Sarah, you could have a conversation with legal again around ways to make this kind of content, weave it in a way that would, and maybe you and Brooke could confer and we could circle back to this on, I think we're reviewing this again on Friday, or we're going to be continuing with the review. So just a couple thoughts.
So I appreciate that, Kirsten. I don't really want to vary from the shell on this and go back to the drawing board. I think for the sake of time, what we have, because I think just to speak to what the shell allows us to do is to make sure that we're treating all the different future land use areas, all the different municipalities equally. And so I think that would be rethinking on a larger scale than what we have time to do diligently at this point. I just introducing a new element such as that, I think we would want to have a revisit of all the different areas. And so I think for the sake of time and efficiency today, what I'd ask the board is if we change this from required revisions to advisory recommendations, could we do that and then move on?
I'd be okay with that, Sarah.
That
Thank you.
works for me, Sarah.
That's fine with me too.
Taylor?
I'll be quick. Just in terms of Cambrian Rise, the letters talk about a lack of civic assets there. But I do want to point out Keyslick Park is there. That is a civic asset that is part of Cambrian Rise. It's on the south side of Cambrian Rise. There is access to the Greenway, the Burlington Bike Path as well, for your consideration. Otherwise, the city, just in quick conversation with city staff, we understand the board's position. Great if you would reconsider, but we understand. With the South End Center, we do appreciate the advisory recommendation regarding connection between, because the city, very much is planning on that to be a center that is as downtowny as downtown. It's going to be the densest part of the city in terms of housing. It has its own downtown organization already, SEBA. And so it's very much the focus of the city to have this be a downtown center. And so we will take that advisory recommendation under consideration and have that South End area be a center if possible.
Sarah, this does speak to a bigger question. I don't want to get us too distracted or diverted, but I continue to struggle as I review these with regard to future land use area, which is what this designation is, versus existing land use and characteristics today. And it feels like we are straddling that, right? And I feel like the statute also straddles that because it demands walkability. It demands, these centers being the commercial and civic centers, and having those functions. And the south downtown area in Burlington's, proposed downtown is a great example of a place that in the future could very well be a downtown center, but today absolutely isn't. And I think the city would be the first to admit that. And so I don't know if the other three of you have thoughts on this, but I feel like we still have to have some representation of what the function is today in order for us to assign it the appropriate future land use area type as a part of the plan. So that's why I continue to be really uncomfortable with the Burlington South Downtown Center and the Cambrian Rise Downtown Center, because those are plans far into the future. Those developments might not come to fruition. And Cambrian Rise is maybe a better example because it's half built out and there's no commercial activity in it, or very little at all. And there may never be any. And if there wasn't any, would we really have called it a downtown center in the first place just because the city hoped that there would be some someday? I'm not sure that we would. So I'm struggling with that, future versus existing statutory requirements today versus plans for the future.
So Alex, I think just to speak to that, and to sort of back up, I think this was mentioned at the pre-application meeting, is when you go to the requirements of 24 VSA 4348A 12, which sets forth these future land use areas, it really doesn't recognize Chittenden County in terms of the infill development and some of legacy suburban areas and how they've transitioned and are transitioning. And it could almost benefit from another future land use category. And I think we talked about that a little bit and being supportive of that if that were to occur. But recognizing we are working within those confines, and you're absolutely spot on, this is supposed to be future land use, but we're tied to the definitions provided in downtown or village centers that talks to the downtown village centers are traditional and historic central business and civic centers within planned growth areas, village centers, or may stay alone. So it is not will be. And so using the language that we've been given, it's imperfect for future land use. It's saying that there has to be something there. And so I think that's absolutely, I think you're spot on. This is sort of where the process is a little bit fraught, and I think we're working our best to apply that, considering. Taylor.
I agree, and this has been the struggle the past year and a half for us. But I do want to just point out in 24 VSA 4348A 12, in the first sentence, it does say a future land use element based upon the elements in this section that sets forth the present and prospective location, amount, intensity, and character of land uses in relation to the provision of necessary community facilities, etc. So there is that prospective location in there as well, for whatever that's worth.
Absolutely. And I think that I think this is a good sort of preamble discussion too, because I think as you go through these areas, I want to again recognize I'm very familiar with the substantial amount of planning that's gone into a lot of these local centers throughout Chittenden County. And I think what wrestling in the analysis, I know many of us wrestled with this, is there are great plans for it to be. It might not be right now. It could be in the future. It could be a future land use map amendment as plans take place and shape. And there's some of those additional characteristics there, but applying the characteristics of the area right now against the BAPTA methodology, what's in 24 VSA, is where we're at. So is everybody okay if I move on from Burlington? All right, I will move on then. And I did have Janet look at this because I will disclose that I did work for, over the course of my career at various different points in time, Colchester, South Burlington, Williston. I meet the AICP, American Institute of Certified Planning, distance from those jobs to be able to correctly evaluate and comment on them. But just given my familiarity with some of those areas, I did ask for Janet to have a second set of eyes, and we're both saying Colchester meets the requirements for the downtown center. We're also saying on Essex, this is, so does anybody have anything on Colchester? Essex. We're saying, and this is the area that's in the vicinity of Old Stage Road, Route 15 and 289. That incorporates the Essex experience. We're saying this area is not consistent with the statutory description of a downtown center. And this is an area that Jan and I sort of flagged for conversation with the board in terms of a required revision. Consider it for another future land use category. And we identified village center transition infill or planned growth area. What's the position of the board on this?
I think this is a really interesting one. And honestly, it's interesting to compare it back to Colchester, which you're very familiar with, Sarah. It's not clear to me what the difference is between the Severance Corners downtown area of Colchester and the Essex Experience downtown area of Essex.
I just highlighted it for you. It's the
Sorry,
legacy.
I'm looking at my document, not yours, but now I see
Oh.
your,
I-
yep.
I believe that's the one difference is, one applied and has a legacy that we can employ and one does not.
Yeah, I don't recall whether there's a statutory requirement that legacy growth centers gain downtown center designation as an FLU in this
So either
process.
downtown or village, they're eligible for either. So under that 4348A12A, it's new town centers.
Well, what I was going to say, Sarah, which I think you already understand very well, is that in the Essex paragraph, and again, we need to be clear why we're saying it's not consistent with the description of a downtown center. It seems to be premised on the fact that it's not a traditional or historic central business district and does not include historic sites, and that the only civic asset appears to be the post office. I'm not convinced that historic sites are necessary for a downtown center. But I get the I get the concern about, a center serving as a sort of central civic and commercial center. The problem is I'm familiar with the town of Essex and their growth center planning, and this area absolutely is a place that they are planning to be their downtown. So it may be that it just doesn't meet it today, but they intend for it to do so in the future. But similar to some of the Burlington conversation we just had, I guess, about today versus the future, I guess. I think I would just say it might be better to add a little bit more in the paragraph narrative about the fact that it doesn't currently serve as a community gathering spot or as a central civic and commercial area of activity, and that the civic assets are negligible in order to make the case.
Yeah, I guess I have a question. Why is it not a traditional or historic central business district?
Can I show the map?
Yeah,
Stop.
bring it up, Sarah. I think, Brooke, mostly because it's a shopping center that, is in the process of being transitioned into something more than a shopping center, but it hasn't quite transformed into more quite yet.
All right, let me go back to.
Also, as Sarah brings the map up, I'm not clear. It'll be interesting to see on the map. I'm not clear if there's any residential uses within the map downtown center. And it seems like that is, having mixed use, including high density residential, is sort of part of the anticipation in statute.
So you have 289 here. Everybody can see my cursor.
Yep.
Old Stage Road. And then this is the corner with the gas station, McDonald's, and I think Phoenix Books is over here now, and Dunkin' Donuts.
Yep. Yeah, so I take back what I just said. I'm sorry. Thank you for showing the map. There's plenty of residential in this downtown center, including some senior housing. So my bad. Needed to see the map to remember.
And again, I think, Alex, this is sort of the struggle in applying the future land use map is, I too am aware of the substantial amount of planning that's gone into this, years of planning. It's unfortunate that they don't have a legacy center, and can come in that way, but, without that, applying the methodology, this was something that Jan and I, concurred in our initial review that this wasn't there yet. in terms of meeting the definition. But Taylor,
But there's a problem, Sarah, right? Like, if it's not a downtown center, then it can't be a village center either. The criteria are the same. At least in 4348A, right? There's no difference in the criteria. And I don't know how we could not call this some kind of a center. I mean, it's got way more going on than Severance Corners does in Colchester, even though that's a legacy area, even if it does have a shopping center in the middle of it. Sorry, go ahead, Sarah. You can have Taylor address us.
I feel like we presented our case on this center on the first, so I'll let that lie. I do want to point out in later when we talk about village centers, there is I believe an advisory recommendation about making the village center, which is a little bit here to the east on 15, a little bit larger. And I think I'm a little bit worried about compatibility with the town plan, but it's not a huge deal when we're talking about PGAs and centers together. But if we expand that village center a little bit larger, we transition this downtown center to PGA. We understand why the LURB would ask us to do that, and at this point in time, we're fine with that if that's what we have to do.
Brooke.
Yeah, I was now looking at the map. That's helpful, but I'm still trying to totally understand why we're saying that it's not consistent. It's not a traditional and historic central business district. Why is that? Like, how long is history and what is tradition? And I'm trying to just understand what it is actually about this that makes it not qualify.
Well, I think what Alex said, or his definition of it's a shopping center. As you can see, that's transitioning. I think in the recent years, it was the outlets and it's transitioned into the experience. But it still is very much an auto-oriented spot that doesn't have a lot of similarities to our traditional Vermont downtowns and cores. It's recognizing the great planning that's going in and that there are steps being made to it, but it's just not there yet. And again, if it had applied for and received one of those legacy definitions or designations, it would be something different. But at this time, it's an area that's in transition from a lot of commercial to something that's perhaps more intense, will become something that's a bit more like a business district or traditional center.
Taylor really hooked me with reading the language again and Alex's concern about present versus future. I'm a little befuddled here and I don't feel clear on the legal standard. And maybe we can have a little bit of direction from our lawyers on this, because I'm not quite grasping what are we looking at, the current, the future, because this language has an awful lot of language about future land uses, which is what this exercise is, right? So I think I need more understanding personally to be able to honestly figure this out and make a vote on, the whole, but also as we're going through.
So I think to sort of continue what we've been doing in Rutland and NRPC and now in Chittenden County is we are taking a look at the statutory language under 24 VSA 4348A 12A, which is prescriptive. So yes, this is future land use, but in order to qualify for some of these different areas, there are certain elements and attributes that need to be present today. And so that's where I think we've been trying to be equitable and apply these and to take a look. And particularly, I think just before I get to Kirsten, just to read downtown or village centers. These areas are the mixed-use centers bringing together community economic activity and civic assets. They include downtowns, villages, and new town centers previously designated under Chapter 76A, and downtowns and village centers seeking benefits under the Community Investment Program under Section 4804 of this title. The downtown or village centers are the traditional and historic central business and civic centers. So I think we spent quite a bit of time last week going over the ands here. And just that's important. So just to read it again, downtown village centers are the traditional and historic central business and civic centers within planned growth areas. Village centers or may stand alone. And then the last sentence is about village centers. Kirsten.
Yeah, this is echoing some of the conversation that occurred in the Northwest Plan Review, in which you'll probably recall I was noting that for some center areas, downtown village, that I wasn't observing a mapped district nor provided information concerning eligibility for listing of a historic site. And I think that we've put a pin in this whole topic. And I guess I'm also struggling a little with this one. I conceptually tend to agree with the position as drafted in the reply, but I also would like to give the RPC an opportunity to return with additional, more, comprehensive information about any area that we are noting doesn't meet the standard and the requirements on this basis, because it's not the, and thank you for reading that language, Sarah. I was also myself, reading it again as you were doing so. And, if we're saying it's not the traditional and historic central business and civic center, et cetera, mixed use, bringing together community economic and civic assets, I think that, and I actually think this is an area I'd like the board to touch on with its 1B application, because I think that we should more explicitly ask the RPC to itself explain this for any of them that are non-legacy or that expand beyond legacy. And so I would, before we sort of close the door on this for this proposed Essex downtown center, I think it's okay to give them that opportunity. I guess that's kind of where I would end on. I mean, and we could if everyone wants to sleep on this, we could sort of circle back to it Friday too, is fine with me. I tend to, based on what I guess where I'm at is, based on the information provided in the submittal, I don't think it's consistent with downtown center, but maybe there's other information that I'm not aware of.
Alex.
So I had a little light bulb go on and it's changing my mind in midstream. So apologies for being sort of on both sides of this. But reading the statute matters. Thanks for doing that, Sarah. The first sentence says, these areas are the mixed use centers bringing together community economic activity and civic assets. This proposed downtown is a mixed use center bringing together community economic activity. If anyone, I don't think anyone could argue that this is where people in Essex go for community economic activity. It is absolutely that place. It does lack civic assets. So that may be an issue, but it definitely does seem to bring the community economic activity and serve as the center for that. The other sentence that talks about the downtown center, village centers are the traditional and historic central business and civic centers. Well, guess what? This is a unique circumstance. The town of Essex's traditional and historic central business and civic center was the village of Essex Junction forever. Those two municipalities are not together anymore. This is a new municipality, right? It no longer includes its traditional historic center. That's Essex Junction now, the city of Essex Junction. So I actually like Brooke's comment about like, what is the time period that we are judging traditional and historic by? I think to some extent we have to recognize that this is one very oddball example in the state of Vermont where it's a recent history of this being the sort of economic center of the town of Essex, but because of the split, it is that. So I might be inclined to give them a thumbs up as a downtown center with that as a that as a rationale. But at the very least, I like Kirsten's thought about if we're not going to give them that, to have a slightly more nuanced response in this letter that says we're uncertain rather than it doesn't meet the requirement and we'd like to see more information or have the case made stronger with the final application.
All right, so I think what I'd like to do is propose that we cross off this language and make this an advisory recommendation instead. And I think what I've heard from the board is provide additional information on civic assets or consider for another future land use. So we're saying you can't provide additional information, you could come back with something else. And I think what I'm also hearing from the board is that something to the effect of not consistent at this time. I think I have language someplace else in here that I can come back to this on. So I'm just going to put in a new comment. Not with current info. Change language. Taylor?
When would it be possible to provide that information to the board? Is that something that we can rush and provide to you in writing tomorrow before the meeting on Friday? Or is this more of you would like this additional information with our full application in May?
So what the board has been doing is with the full application in May, it's been very helpful to have folks from RPCs attending and helping us and advising us. And I think what we've tried to do is just given the timing and making sure that everything is being treated equitably as that would be with the final application.
Okay, just real quick to add on to that, I think that's fine. We'll do that. As you're thinking about process in the future, this is the first time we're doing this all. I would love an ability to interact with the board in some way between this meeting and May. We can't fix that right now. In terms of civic assets, I just do want to remind the board today that there is a municipally owned parcel on the north side of 15 that is planned for a municipal campus for the new town of Essex. Not civic assets now, but there is a municipally owned parcel that should be the town office and library in the future.
And it's currently owned by the town.
I will verify that, Brooke, but that is my understanding. Yes.
So thank you. And we are also working to figure out what that process period in between pre-app and final looks like in terms of how the board can interact, and we'll hopefully be able to provide some guidance on that too in the future. Kirsten.
So I would, as one board member, not want to limit it to information around civic assets. Like I think that we should just make it a general, provide additional information demonstrating why the proposed downtown area conforms with 24 VSA 4348A 12A. Like just leave it a general, because there may
We can
be.
just say it provide additional information. I think where I was trying to go with this is encapsulating what I've heard from the board. And what I've heard from the board is you're not as concerned regarding the business portion of this. I think what on that whole list of things, it's the civic assets. I think that additional information is needed on. I think everybody, from what I've heard from you, feels that the business portion is addressed as well as the mixed use center. Is that
Well, I
fair?
think, no, I think that it's also the history of the municipality, that there could be information provided about that would be relevant, in my opinion. And I think that's also what another board member expressed. So
Yeah,
it's
Sarah,
more
I'm
that,
fine
again,
with
it's
it.
more,
I'm fine
yeah.
with it just saying provide additional information or
Yeah, me
consider
too.
another future land.
Yep.
Then it's just general and gives them carte blanche to provide whatever they want.
Yeah,
And
and we've
Taylor's
had
been
it-
here, so he heard the conversation. He knows the nuance.
exactly. Yep, thank you.
All right, I'm going to move on from Essex to Essex Junction. If
Can I
everybody's
just say
okay,
one
Brooke?
other? I just want to say one other thing on Essex, and that is, at the moment, I'm not in agreement with that language. I just want to say, and I'm not exactly sure whether I am in the approval category at this stage, but I will say on Friday, before Friday or on Friday, any more information that Taylor might want to provide to the board, I am happy to listen to. I don't think we need to say we won't take it till the spring if, they want to reiterate or provide information on Essex, because
So,
I'm
Brooke-
on the fence myself.
Brooke, I hear you, but I think what I'm going to advocate for is just we need to keep uniformity between how we treat CCRPC this week and how we treated NRPC last week. I think NRPC asked us the same question and we answer it the same way that I just answered it. So I just want to make sure that we are providing an equitable answer to our RPC folks and not allowing one to do something that we didn't allow another to do. So I hear you, and I appreciate Taylor's attending and speaking with us, but in terms of providing additional reports or exhibits at this point, I just feel like I have to guard against that.
I appreciate that. It's actually the information that Alex provided that I find really relevant and interesting about when the town was established. So that's sort of a really important factor, I think, to consider. Anyway, thanks.
All right, Essex Junction. Hopefully this is simple enough. We're saying this meets the requirements for a downtown. Is everybody okay with that? Milton, I'm going to call up Janet's comments because there was a little bit. And so I felt, based upon everything, that this area met the requirements for a downtown center. There was the municipal complex, there was mixed use. I think there were concerns expressed regarding the sort of strip development along Route 7 that has occurred within this area. And Janet wanted me to share her note on this that said, alternatively, this is more of a transition infill area because of the features of strip development outside the town's traditional center. So how does the board feel on this?
Easy for me to say with Jenna not here, but I don't agree with that. I feel like the proposed Milton Downtown Center checks the boxes, and that community has done leaps and bounds to move away from the strip development that characterized it in the 70s and the 80s and into the 90s. So I think it conforms. I think it is the economic and civic center of the community. I think that the historic village center that they have mapped as a village center to the north, is relevant as well, but it's not the downtown. In this area that they've mapped absolutely is. So I think it meets the requirements. I'm happy with the language in the response letter.
Worker Kirsten?
Yeah, I think that I again would ask for more information in support of that it meets that statutory requirement of the traditional, historic center and mixed uses. I know, I observe the legacy designation area is to the north and aligns with the village center. And so it's a bit, if it seems a bit, just kind of out of sync, like the area to the north is what was first designated and is not what's proposed for the designated downtown. So I guess I'm kind of, I feel like I need more information. And part of it is kind of that history element, which I know I keep sort of bringing up.
Is everybody seeing the map now?
Yeah, I have it up too.
Is everybody else having, maybe that's the problem with the map viewer, everybody else has it up?
I also have it up.
I
Yep.
have it up and I could share. Do you want me to do that?
Oh, hold on.
Oh, there you go.
You zoom in, it comes back. So here's Route 7. Here's Bombardier, and I think the municipal complex is here.
Yep.
There's a park here. There's the shopping center here. And it goes over the corner and has the high school and a bunch of different residences and businesses. And so between the school and the town offices and the park, it has civic, it has the mixed use, it has the business. And this has been an area of commercial and business for Milton for quite some time.
Right. It's not it doesn't have the history that the village center to the north has. There aren't giant single family homes, Victorians from the 1800s like there are on that stretch of the village center. But I used to drive through this area all the time, and I liked driving through that village center along that road because it was pretty, but it's not where people congregate. It's where people maybe congregated in the late 1800s. We're way past that now. So, where they congregate now is the proposed downtown center. That's why I'm trying to advocate for it, because I really do feel like it checks the boxes and has the assets to make it a downtown, even if it didn't have a legacy designation to build on.
So Alex had my hand up.
Kirsten.
So not to put you on the spot, Alex, but maybe could you speak a little bit to how do you square the statutory language that says the downtown or village centers are the traditional and historic central business and civic centers? How do you kind of square that element of the statutory language here?
Yeah, good question. Two ways. So a traditional so it says traditional and historic central business and civic centers are the traditional, historic, and central business and civic centers. To my mind, traditional doesn't equate to old. Traditional equates to function. And how does that area, does it function in a traditional way, in ways that we understand and have some experience with in terms of being a central business area and and a civic center. And I think in this case, it does. You know, if you've not been to the park and the municipal complex, it it is a gathering point for people. I've been there and recreated there, and it's walkable, and it's people drive there from outside of the downtown, and so it's a gathering place. Um, just like the economic center with, you know, where the supermarket is, and then up near the high school. It's really this historic word in that sentence that is the sticky one, right? And so it says downtowns and village centers are the traditional and historic central business and civic center. And I don't know how to square that, Kirsten, except to maybe walk down Brooks' concept of whose history are we talking about, and what period of time does that mean, right? Vermont's been here for a very long time. Does historic mean 200 years ago? Does it mean 100 years ago? Does it mean 50 years ago? And I don't have an answer for that. So I'm willing to bend and not be overly prescriptive about what period of time we're talking about. And I want to make sure that we're focused on the function. And unlike some of these other downtown centers that we've potentially had concerns with because they don't even exist yet, they're only planned, but they don't have the infrastructure or the assets. In Milton, it all exists. There's a high school right down the road from the grocery store that everybody in that community shops at, which is, walking distance from the municipal building, and a senior housing project, and, innumerable residences. So, yeah, I don't have a good answer for you on what I want to put boundaries on in terms of historic, but that's some of my thinking.
Thank you very much for your sharing
All
your
right.
thoughts.
So I'm going to, because we're an hour in and we've only made it to the M's and the downtowns, I'm going to try and keep this moving along. Brooke, we haven't heard from you yet. First of all, can I stop sharing the map, or is there anything that people want to see and go back to the language? All right.
I think I'm aligned with Alex on this one, and I really appreciate his, the definition of traditional. I think it's context specific, and I think functionality is really important. Not to ignore the language, but not to turn the language into something that it's not necessarily intended. So I would stick with it meets the requirements with you and Alex, if that's where you still are.
So I think there are at least 3 board members that are saying that it meets it. So I think what we'll do is we'll keep on moving on. And I think this is a very robust conversation. I appreciate it. And I think that these were tough areas to get through. I'd like to move on to Shelburne, which was another sort of tough area, and some differing thoughts on it. This is the area that is sort of focused around their traditional village. There is a legacy village area there. I think some of the concerns were it was included in the museum. And I think this is another one where I'll read Janet's comments. I think there was a strong feeling that since the museum is off limits, it's fee-based in terms of getting through, it perhaps was not something that should be included in the downtown area. And I think that was a required revision to exclude the museum from the downtown area. And with an advisory recommendation saying include 2 planned growth area parcels to the adjacent northern area to serve. Janet was saying alternatively this area is more of a transition infill. I think I have the right one. Hang on. Nope, sorry. I think she was on the fence about including those parcels. Let me go back to sharing my screen with the map. And if at any point I leave the meeting, I will come back. It's just right next to the share button. is the leave meeting, and I'm sure I'm going to hit it at some point today, so. This is all a little bit much to be running the meeting, running the map, and running
I've
the
got the map
language, so.
up. If you would
My
like me to
apologies.
share the map at any point, I'm happy to do that, Sarah.
Well, thank you, particularly if I leave the meeting, feel free to.
Okay.
Maybe if I zoom in, it won't.
While Sarah is scrolling, I'll just say that this one, there's a required revision that sort of speaks to harkens back to the comments earlier about how prescriptive we want to be with these recommendations when we say that the area is not consistent. But honestly, I thought Shelburne Museum was an odd thing to include in the downtown, and I didn't have a good sort of basis for that, except that it just felt odd until I read this language and realized, oh yeah, it's fenced. It's private. You cannot enter that area unless you go to the ticket booth and pay money to get inside. So I think that language in the narrative is helpful. Yeah.
So let me just, before I take Taylor's notes, I will just, now that I'm zoomed in enough, the two parcels here were these PGA areas that are really only accessible from the downtown side of things. This stream/river corridor through the back really bisects it from the rest of the PGA. And so that was an advisory, is just to consider including those with the downtown area. But this was the area to remove and possibly turn into PGA or transition infill. Taylor.
We're fine removing the museum and making it PGA.
I'm going to stop sharing the map unless any of the board members want to. Okay. I go back to the document. So is the board okay with the language as written? Kirsten.
Yes, but I think we would identify all of it as advisory recommendation if we're going to follow the, what we've been discussing for purpose of this letter. Recognizing, that we can improve the standard language, but I think here we would nonetheless just say exclude Shelburne Museum. We would list that as an advisory recommendation alongside the recommendation to remove the two parcels.
Brooke.
Sarah, how about you and I talk with Jenny or Rebecca before Friday about the language, and maybe there's an easier way to resolve that concern of mine with some qualification language somewhere that can also be communicated to the prior regional planners, sort of along the lines that if we said required revision, just to sort of make sure people understand what we're saying when we say that, instead of worrying about it each time we come up on it right now.
All right. I would say that there's very limited time, so I'm happy to have a conversation. Not sure I'm optimistic about resolving that given the time that we have, but absolutely, if you could take the lead in trying to arrange that with Rebecca, who's been of assistance with these from our legal counsel. But
Sure.
Alex?
Oh, I'm fine with the language the way it's drafted, or ameliorated with making it advisory with regard to the specific revision that we're suggesting. But generally, I'm fine with this one.
Okay. So I think I'll continue on then, and get to South Burlington, which we're saying meets the requirements for a downtown center. I do want to go to Janet's note that I think her feeling was that some portions of this might be more transition infill because It has features of strip development outside of the town's traditional and historic center. And again, I think this gets to something that I heard Alex state, which is the traditional and historic center for South Burlington was Burlington. I think what you have within this area, I can show the map, has been an area that has a lot of municipal and civic infrastructure now and has infilled. But I'd like to hear what other board members have for thoughts.
I'm fine with the language in the letter as drafted. I think South Burlington is somewhat unique and very interesting case study. And yeah, I think it checks the boxes well enough and deserves to be a downtown center.
Kirsten Brook? Kirsten?
I'm fine with the recommendation as drafted. Like I'm fine with South Burlington's designated downtown proposal and what's been drafted here.
Me too. All right, we'll move on to Williston. So we are saying that this meets the requirements for a downtown center. There is a legacy growth center area in here. They have chosen not to go to the boundaries of that legacy area with their new downtown. I think what we have under advisory recommendations is to consider increasing the downtown area to include all the entire legacy designation. I think there is some information provided to us at the pre-application meeting, but perhaps having more information along that front. But it's the proportionality of the rather substantial large planned growth area compared to the smaller downtown area. And we're also saying consider including whole parcels to assist with a transformation to a PED-oriented center. What Janet had for a note here was the proportionality and more depth to the downtown center, I think was another way of stating it. So Kirsten.
So this was the growth center. And I think it's the downtowns, villages, and new town centers legacy designations that get the automatic inclusion for downtown or village center. And I'm just again noting that the definition of downtown as we've been reading it focuses on the historic and traditional mixed use civic centers, etc. And I'm just not clear on this one. Why the designated downtown? To me, the traditional historic center in Williston is to the east, which is now mapped for village center. And I just wanted to discuss this because I think we look at it anew. It's not with respect to the legacy designation, unless I'm missing something here. I think the only legacy designation that I'm seeing is growth center on the map.
I think you're reading the statute correctly, Kirsten, that growth centers are called out as being sort of, I don't know if automatically is the right word, but referenced in regard to planned growth areas, not referenced in regard to downtown and village centers, according to 4848 or 4348A.
Yeah, it
But-
says they include
so
downtowns, villages, new town
we-
centers, but they don't list the growth centers. So could we,
So
like, we
we
talk
can get
about
over
this?
that. We can get over that hump and then just talk about the substance, right? Like it doesn't
Yes.
meet the test as a downtown center, regardless of the legacy status. What's it missing in your mind, Kirsten?
Well, I guess I just don't see it as the traditional and historic, and I guess I'll go back to that definition. You know, mixed use center bringing together community, economic activity and civic assets. I mean, obviously it has the economic and business and mixed use element, but I just don't, based on what's been provided and, you know, being familiar with this area, I just don't see it as a traditional and historic central business and civic center for the community. I see that as to the east where it's mapped village center.
Yeah, what are the civic assets within the proposed downtown center? Because the schools and the fire station and the town offices are all in that village center to the east that Kirsten's referring to.
I don't know why the future land use just blipped off. Let me see if I can turn it back on.
Taylor, do you want to go ahead while Sarah's grappling with the mapping?
Sure, if that's okay. Very good question. Some are existing, some are planned. And so, we do have a civic asset in terms of that Maple Tree Place green. It is technically private, but I think would equate it to a civic asset. I can confirm that it is private, not public. There is a municipally owned parcel. You see that large stormwater pond. There is a municipally owned parcel right next to that where there is a planned future transit center in that location. And then if you look at the Williston official map, there are multiple locations throughout this entire area that have been identified as future municipal parks. Williston is very cognizant of the fact that there is a lack of civic assets in this area, and they're actively planning to obtain land to have civic assets here, because this is where eventually the majority of people in Williston are going to live, likely. That's what they're planning for. So not perfect right now, but certainly the municipality is planning to have additional civic assets here actively through an official map.
Vermont State University does have a presence over
They do.
in this
Yep.
vicinity too.
Correct. Yep, there is the university there, if you consider that a civic asset.
Again, so much in Chittenden County is a little bit odd because it doesn't stand up to maybe some of the statutory construction of the quaint little village center at the middle of a town where everything sort of has been for the last 250 years. And part of my conundrum is Williston's proposed downtown center, is a regionally significant commercial center. It has significance far beyond just the community of Williston. I don't know how to quite dovetail that with the statutory notion of what a community center, economic center and civic center or civic area is. But I take Kirsten's point. Yeah, that certainly I think no one would argue that the traditional and historic center of Williston is the village area, not the Taft's Corners area that's proposed for this downtown. But boy, a lot of planning's gone into this growth center, and a lot of good things are happening there. It is an economic driver, not just for the town, but for the whole region. And the official map is no small tool to implement a vision for creating civic assets like future public roads and parks. Most communities don't have an official map, and the fact that Williston does and is actively utilizing it to create the vision is significant.
So Kirsten, is there additional information that you would like to have under advisory recommendation?
Well, yeah, I guess if we could look at the advisory recommendation as drafted, it says consider increasing to include the entire legacy designation. I don't agree with that because I don't see the relevancy of that legacy designation. And so I guess it's another one of the general, like, tell me more, tell
So
me
I think
more
that's
about
the
why.
second part of that sentence is, you could say the legacy designation, or you could say consider increasing the size of the growth center to add depth to the area and assist with proportionality of planned growth area, because there's a lot of planned growth area compared to a relatively small downtown area. And this is a regional commercial center that could be increased. They chose to actually decrease it in terms of what they're calling for in a downtown from their growth center. So call it what you like. I think the idea was just the proportionality.
Sarah, I'm not sure which of Janet's comments are pertaining to this paragraph. What was Janet saying about it?
So she was just saying about, I don't understand what this means to assist with proportionality. Perhaps this means more depth to downtown is advisable, and that's where I added this portion about to add depth to the area. So that
Gotcha.
was, so that
Gotcha.
you can see it was one of her resolved comments. I'm showing these because I said that I would. So I apologize. I don't mean to have confusion there, but
and
I kind of
just have
agree
one.
with Kirsten that I don't think expanding this proposed downtown center to the full scope of the prior legacy growth center makes it any better, especially on the south side where we would be telling them in an advisory way to expand it to include the big box stores, which they specifically chose not to include. I don't want to tell them that. I don't think that's a good idea. But that's a minor thing as opposed to the larger question of whether this is a downtown future land use area or not.
How long has it been a commercial area? I'm trying to think back.
So there was the whole Pyramid Mall litigation, I think, from the 1970s, and some of the development at Taft Corners started probably in the early 1980s.
Yep, I agree. I think it was 80s, but it didn't really come to much fruition until Maple Tree Place, was built. And I don't know when that was exactly. I want to say,
The 90s?
yeah, I want to say 90s, early 90s.
Taylor?
It was a little bit later. I think the litigation was finally settled at Maple Tree Place in like the mid 90s. And so I think construction was closer to like 97, 98, 99. Blair Park, as Sarah and Alex mentioned, that the Northwest quadrant, that's definitely 80s vintage. Kind of started to see Southwest quadrant more in the 90s. My dad worked at UPS. That was one of the first things built there in the early 90s. But then Maple Tree Place, late 90s. And then frankly, there hasn't been much non-FBC that's been constructed here in about 10 years. Everything that's been constructed recently is multi-story buildings, typically residential in the Northeast quadrant.
So I think where we've discussed some of these different downtowns is what I've heard from the board is a lot of flexibility in terms of being willing to give the benefit of the doubt. I'm not hearing a strong opposition to saying that this meets the requirement for a downtown center. I think that there is the need, per Kirsten's concerns, to have an advisory recommendation for some additional information, and wondering if somebody could offer me something specific that they would like to see in terms of additional information on this. Kirsten.
Can I ask a question, just so I'm understanding the other board members' positions on it? Sarah, is it your understanding that like you and Janet both see this as meeting the requirements for a downtown center? And then Alex and Brooke, where do you stand? If not, and if you don't want me to put you on the spot like that, because I'm not there. Like I think as I said, it's kind of tell me more. I need more information in order to reach that conclusion.
I hate to be just utterly practical about it rather than, hewing to the letter of the statute. But if it's not going to be a center, either a downtown center or a village center, what the heck is it? Because it can't be a planned growth area. It wouldn't be close enough to the historic village center to be walkable and to make sense. So what is it? Did you map that entire area as transition infill? That seems awkward. So again, I think there's a lot of uniqueness going on in Chittenden County, and this is another example. And for me, I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt and call it a downtown center with some acknowledgement that I hear what you're saying, Kirsten, and I understand. You're making logical points about your
Okay, so
concerns.
if we're saying it meets the we have 3 board members who are saying they think it meets the requirements for a downtown center, then I think we're done. I don't think we need to make advisory recommendations.
Agree.
Let me
So-
just jump in. Let me just add my thoughts, and that is, I don't want, the description of we're employing great flexibility on the law. I don't agree with saying it that way. And that is why I am trying to find the principle behind this traditional and historic, business district and civic center. And I think that's why, when did Taft's Corner start? And I think that factual information is important. It's not that we are applying the law differently. We have different facts. And like Alex was saying, I think that, if this was conceptualized about villages and, quaint villages, and we're dealing with Chittenden County that has very unique and different layouts, I agree that we need to figure out how to apply this statute, but not that we're not following it, that we have a rational basis for the way in which we are applying it to this factual scenario. That to me is our guiding light, to be consistent and to treat people equitably. It doesn't mean the exact same application in every single thing because facts are different. So I follow what you guys, where you're coming out. I think practicality is important, but not to trump a truly appropriate basis for concluding that this is that this meets the requirements of the downtowns. So I am holding on to a methodology here, and I do think I go with you guys on this one. But
Thanks,
I want to
Brooke.
be clear that there's a really important premise here. We're not just willy-nilly dealing with these things without having a really rational basis for doing what we're doing.
I will acknowledge, I think where we're at is, I hear what Brooke says in terms of being logical and rational. And I also want to recognize Alex's observation with state statute and that Chittenden County is a very different area than I think that what is anticipated in statute. And it can be exceedingly challenging to try and shoehorn some of these areas into the future land uses, recognizing the facts that we have at hand. So thank you guys. We've made it to Winooski. The only thing that I'll ask before I continue on is I heard about striking the advisory recommendation. I struck a portion of it. Does the board want the entirety of the advisory recommendation struck or just the portion that is shown?
I don't have any problem with the rest of it.
I'd just throw it out entirely. I'm not gonna be a stick in the mud on that. But if you ask my opinion, yeah, I'd get rid of it all.
Kirsten?
If we retain any of it, I am most comfortable with the last sentence concerning pedestrian orientation, pedestrian oriented. So it sounds like Alex and I would tend to get rid of it, but Sarah, if it's, your interpretation that we have 3 board members who would retain it, I guess that would be my request, is just omit everything except the last sentence.
Well, I think that first part says consider increasing proposed downtown center, and then in the last sentence we're saying about how to do it. So I think we'll leave it as is for the time being and move on if it's not of too much consequence to people. Because I do think that encapsulates some of the variety of things that we've heard today. Winooski, we're saying that this meets it. We're saying we could eliminate the legs to better consolidate to a broader core. So Kirsten, would you show the map on Winooski? That would be helpful if you have that or can load that up in the background. And I'll just say that I think Janet's comment on this was about the comment about tying this to the form-based code. And I think, Alex, that goes to one of your comments. So
Can I just explain the layers a little bit quickly? So these are the legacy downtown, and then the legacy NDA in blue. And obviously the proposed downtown is the purple.
I
So
think
I-
we can move. I think we can move on. I'd be surprised if anybody thought this didn't meet the requirement. Maybe somebody does, but my only comments that are somewhat reflected in these advisory recommendations is that it's a spider or a bug with 3 legs, or it's an odd shape, and there's a lot going on in Winooski outside of those 3 main corridors, and if they were to include a little bit of what's in between along Spring Street, east and west, it would hang together just fine for me as a more cohesive downtown center. But what they proposed seems to meet the standard in my mind.
Keller?
Does the rest of the board agree with that advisory recommendation and what Alex just spoke about? Because I couldn't help myself, and I've already been talking to Winooski about what that may look like if we made it a little bit bigger. So I'm interested in the board's thoughts on that.
Kirsten?
Whether
Yeah, I just want to point out that the neighborhood development areas are not one of the types of legacy designations that automatically get the status. And the advisory recommendation is to, improve the shape, basically, right? And I think that it should be more cohesive, and this should be a requirement. I don't think that this is very, it's not, it's just it's not very cohesive or sort of central, but interested to know what other people think. I mean, it's definitely the downtown area of Winooski. It belongs in that designation, but it's just that mapping it out along the street so narrowly in 3 directions is not consistent with sort of like the central cohesiveness. But
Keller?
Sorry, I had to jump in on this one. I mean, I hear you, Kirsten, but this really intensive planning process, development of the form-based code, and agreement in the municipality that we need to have density on our gateways. And so, on those arms right now, those are the parts of the city where you're going to see, I believe, even required at least 2 or 3 story buildings, up to 5 and 6 stories. And so that's where we're going to have that downtown kind of built form, is along those gateways. And that's also where we have transit, at least on Main Street, the kind of the north-south one, and the East Allen Street 15 towards Essex. It is a reflection of, development is going to be a lot different there than it is going to, well, it's going to be a little bit different than what's going to happen in the neighborhoods behind that have access to water and
Behind,
sewer.
yeah.
Yeah. But, this is a place that's all subject to the Home Act. You're going to have fourplex by right throughout the entire city.
Anyone else? I think that it is Winooski. It's a 1 square mile, and again, the whole thing could be a downtown. Recognizing that Winooski does want to have some local differences to how it how some of that large, more dense area impacts some of its historic neighborhoods. So I can hear both sides of it in terms of trying to infill and not have necessarily those sort of strips moving forward from the core. But I think it's an advisory recommendation, and so it's something to be considered. Do I have any other thoughts on the board before I'll share the, thank you, Kirsten, for sharing the map. I'm going to share this again on Winooski before we move on to village centers. Is everybody okay with Winooski? Okay, I'm getting head nods. I'm going to go.
Can we just, the reference to follows the legacy downtown designation. Okay, then you say with the addition of NDA area designation. Okay.
It's just a description.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I guess I would just also, just to be consistent, I would just quickly say I don't disagree with the advisory recommendation, but I don't know of the necessity here. So just because the determination is it meets the requirements. So,
Right.
but yeah, we can keep going.
All right, village centers. This comment here was resolved because we just need to make sure that the shell language matched up. This was part of the challenge of writing this while Kirsten was writing hers, and you were revising the shell as I was revising the shell, and it was sort of a shell game, pun intended.
Oh, I didn't revise the shell at all. Just so you know, like I wasn't involved in the development of the shell, the template.
Well, you, by creating the NRPC findings, help advance the shell, whether you knew it or not.
Okay,
So.
yes, okay, yeah.
So we're on to village centers, and I'm going to go through as many of I can today, recognizing that we're getting a little bit late in the hour. The first is Bolton, and we're saying that it meets it. And we're saying our advisory recommendation, there's a funky corner around IA9. I'm seeing a thumbs up from Taylor. Does anybody have anything on Bolton from board members? All right, I'm going to move into Burlington. And this has 2 village center areas, one on Shelburne Road and one on the north end. And we're saying that the Shelburne Road one, I think, and this gets to, I knew I had this in here somewhere, cannot determine that the proposed Shelburne Road Village Center meets the requirements of a village center. So that's something that I'll try and take Brooke and wordsmith on some of the other ones. And so our required revision here is provide additional information supporting the proposed Shelburne Road Village Center as a traditional civic center. We can make that advisory. I think that would probably be in keeping with what the board has asked for. Is that okay?
Do we want,
Brooke, did you?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out if we need to specify or like Alex was saying, tell them what it is, that's deficient. Or that we need more information on. Do we want to be specific about that or not?
So I think we did do a pretty good summative paragraph up above here. And we also had some good questions about, does it include any historic features or civic assets? They could expand it potentially along Pine Street and Home Ave to try and include some more of those features. Kirsten.
I think that we do state, right, does not appear to include historic features or civic assets. I think I would be more comfortable with the advisory recommendation, just referring to the statute. You know, the just general, instead of saying as a traditional business and civic center, and not, that particular wording doesn't mention historic features. I would be more comfortable keeping it more general, consistent with the language that we, I think, agreed to use above, which is broader. And I'm comfortable if you want to, you know, Sarah, work on that offline and, you know, maybe show us a refinement on Friday or something. It's fine. We don't have to wordsmith it perfectly now. Yeah,
Alex?
interested to know what others think, obviously.
I'm fine with the language with, the way you're revising it. I have a nitpicky comment that's not that important, but the advisory recommendation, if you're going to just have provided additional information, then it's great. If you're going to keep that second sentence about consider including the city park at the corner of Pine Street and Home Ave, it's not at the corner of Pine Street and Home Ave. It's near the corner of Pine Street and Home Ave. There's residential houses on that corner on all sides. And there's no city park there. It's just down the road on Pine Street a little bit.
All right. Are we good? Taylor?
Yeah, just for the board's consideration, I think, you know, our discussions with Burlington about this center is directly linked to our conversations about the South End Downtown Center and South Burlington about their village center. You know, I think it's going to be a conversation with both those municipalities about how we put these recommendations together in a way that's cohesive and makes sense.
Duly noted.
I'm going to, for the sake of time, move on to the next Burlington village, which is the New North End. And I think this was an area that the current language is saying it meets the requirement. I think I'll go to Janet saying that she would say that it's maybe could be conserved for a transition infill or PGA instead. I think the reason why I was noting the New North End as meeting it is because you do have quite a bit of civic infrastructure here. It is it has transit, a post office, library, fire station, supermarket. It rather does act as a traditional mixed use business district for that area. I'm happy to hear what the board thinks.
My backyard, so I know it well. And yeah, it definitely serves all of those functional uses. I think it's an appropriate designation, given what's going on in that part of Burlington. And historically, for your benefit, Kirsten, but you probably remember, it used to have the best cheap movie theater where the cheap seats were. So, you know, there's a real history of people congregating in this area. Sorry, that's a little bit of a joke. It's also, immediately adjacent to one of Burlington's largest parks. Letty Park is immediately adjacent. So yeah, it checks all sorts of boxes in my mind. I like it as a village center.
So under the advisory recommendation, we have the New North End Village Center may be considered as a potential downtown. I think this was something that came up in the pre-application meeting, so that comment was included here. And as it has traditional business district and is inclusive of mixed use, it's served by municipal water, sewer, and transit, and is covered by municipal zoning and subdivision regulations. But that was just something that was brought up at the pre-application meeting. Happy to hear the board's thoughts on that. Kirsten.
And are there known historic elements? I guess, I'm just kind of, I feel like this could be the same as the other Burlington downtown language, and that, sort of provide more information in support of establishing that this is a traditional historic downtown. But I guess I'm just wondering, and maybe Alex, I do think of the New North End, has some historical elements in general, but I'm not myself sufficiently familiar with the area that's been mapped to know, if it comprises historic elements or traditional elements. If you could speak to that, someone, feel free to sort of persuade me. I'm sort of feeling unsure because I don't feel I have all of the relevant information.
The history of the New North End doesn't go back very far. So that's, per Brooke's comment early on, like, it has to be fact specific and context sensitive, right? And so the New North End is not a circa 1800s village center the way, Westford or Shelburne is. And, a place that was developed in the 50s has a history that extends back to the 50s. And so, yeah, there's the buildings that I think of in this proposed village center that have, a longer tail on them include, I'm gonna say a building, and if you weren't there, you wouldn't remember it. It's the former DMV building, so, which is a little hard to describe where it is in the center, but it's sort of in the northwest portion of the proposed village center area. It's a beautiful building. It used to house the Department of Motor Vehicles and others, and was redeveloped for residential and other commercial uses. Aside from that pretty building, there's buildings that are the purview of 50s, 60s, and 70s development, and they're historic in that sense from that vintage.
I'll just mention that as the building Alex mentioned as a DMV, it was historically a school even before that. And then it is outside the village center, but there is St. Mark's Church, which is a very historically significant church a little bit further north on the avenue, quarter mile from this village center. That church being really notable in that it was one of the first Catholic churches in the country that had that sort of very cross shape. That became very popular later in the 1950s and 60s in Catholic church design in the United States.
Any other thoughts from board members about this advisory recommendation on the New North End? Or we can move on to Charlotte. And it's advisory, so it's.
Can I just get some clarity around the board members' position on the New North End? Sarah and Alex, I'm interpreting you both interpret that it meets the requirements. I don't know that we've heard from Brooke.
So I'm saying that it meets the requirements for village center.
What do you think, Brooke?
Yeah, sorry to press, I mean,
Are you asking me if I think it qualifies as a village center or that I'm okay with the advisory suggestions?
Whether or not it qualifies for a village center.
I'm inclined to agree. And again, I go back to what Alex mentioned again. I think it's contextual in terms of this notion of history and tradition.
All right, and then I will ask the board, is everybody okay with leaving the advisory comment? Something, we're telling them that Cambrian Rise is not a downtown, and so I think this was considered to be an offset where I think that was the sort of context of the discussion at the pre-application meeting. Was this might not be, but this other thing might be. You can look into it. It's advisory only.
I don't have a strong feeling about this. I don't really care if it's there or if it goes.
I think it's unnecessary to say that. But
Yeah, I think I would agree, Sarah. I mean, you know, it's like we mentioned it here, but how many other possible times could we have said that to somebody, or you know what I mean? Maybe we should just let that one be eliminated. They kind of
Right.
know anyway, because we already talked about it, right, Taylor?
Right. Well, however, I think it's good to say that we're leaving the door open a crack. And again, I think a lot of Chittenden County gets to, if not here, where. I think these are areas that have all the infrastructure. They want the density, they want the housing, they want the development. And so I think we've tried to give advisory recommendations that are helpful and can advance some of those larger goals. And if you guys feel very strongly that this contradicts some of that, we can take it out. But otherwise, I hate to remove comments that advance housing opportunities and density for communities. When there's ambivalence. So I'd like to hear.
I don't think it matters though, Sarah. Village
Okay.
center versus downtown. From the standpoint, the issues you're raising, they're equivalent, right? So I'm happy to side with Kirsten and Brooke and just then recommend just delete it. Move on.
All right, we're moving on. Charlotte. We're saying there are two village centers, east and west. We're saying both meet them. Advisory, we're saying about including whole parcels, and then on the east there was an area that was bisected. That would be nice to avoid sort of a weird zigzag. Is everybody okay with Charlotte's two villages meeting? All right, I'm seeing head nods. Going to get to Colchester, which is going to become a little bit more intricate. There are 5 village centers. There's the Fort, Main Street, Warner's Corners, which is that Heidelberg Prim area, Blakely Road, and West Lakeshore Drive. And again, I did have Janet look at this for a second set of eyes and incorporate comments. The Fort, Ethan Allen area, which is along Route 15, includes National Register Historic District, a mix of businesses, residences, and civic properties, including a state complex, and we're saying that that meets the village center designation. And Kirsten, would you in the background pull up the map for some of these for Colchester, just so if we need to zoom in, we can?
Sure,
Not
can you
that
see
need to
that?
share it. Don't need to share it now. Nope.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
That's,
Probably booted your share out.
yep, hang on.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. Main Street, which is up along Route 2A, which includes the historic village of Colchester, has an elementary school, library, a mix of businesses and residences and historic properties. and we're saying that that meets it. Warner's Corners, which is that intersection of Heiberg, Prem McRae, and Porter's Point, includes an elementary school, the drive-in shopping complex, different offices. I think those are UVM medical offices and several residences. It lacks historic properties, but is a traditional center for commerce within the area going back into the 60s and 70s. And we're saying also with the zoning, and it is conducive to being a village center. Blakely Road, where the municipal complex is, it's a very small proposed village center with about roughly 13 parcels. And West Lakeshore Drive. And sorry, the West Lakeshore Drive has 13 parcels. I think the Blakely Road one has less. And those two by themselves, we're saying we cannot determine that those two meet the definition for a village center. And here, I think is an amalgamation of the discussion that Janet and I had on this. Before I get into Blakely and West Lakeshore Drive, does the board have any areas of concerns on the first three village areas? I can't see everybody, but I'm not hearing anything. So Kirsten.
So the call it the Fort Ethan Allen one, that's the easternmost one that is partly, adjoins one in Essex. I'm familiar with that area. I just don't see how that would be characterized as the, traditional and historic center bringing together, commerce and civic
Do you want to post the
engagement.
map?
Sure.
Sorry, you were going to share the map before. Maybe you should share it now.
Okay. So these are the 5, right? 1,
Do you
2,
want
3,
to zoom
4,
into the
5.
port?
Yep.
Zoom in a little bit more on the Colchester side.
Yep.
So you have some of the parade grounds, which is a recreation space in the front along Route 15. You have all the officers' quarters right along the parade grounds, some of those historic brownstones. Up behind there, you have what was the UVM student housing, which are now apartments. Behind there, you have, I think some of that still might be housing for St. Michael's College, but some of it I think has also transitioned into apartments, as well as the Vermont Youth Symphony Orchestra Eli Long building. VPR.
Is that this one?
Nope, you're on the VTrans site out and back.
Oh, okay.
So that's part of one of the state complexes within the area. The Eli Long Music Center is what used to be the stables. It's almost smack dab in the middle. It's the largest building.
That one there.
Yep, you got it.
Yeah.
And then a little bit to the north of that is the Vermont Public, and also there's another radio station back there too. And several different businesses, a couple of different state facilities. And so it has that sort of historic element to it, a wide variety of mixed uses, civic uses. Again, it's not the typical 200-year-old Main Street village center, but it's definitely is a historic mixed use business area. Taylor.
I just want to note that this is maybe the best example of adaptive reuse in the entire state, in my opinion, where both public and private partners have done a lot to preserve the existing historic fabric here. I know it doesn't look like a traditional Main Street, but it is on the National Register. It has a mix of uses. It's truly walkable. It is a gathering place in the community. To me, I think this clearly meets the statutory intent.
Any other board members? I'm going to keep on moving along with the other two Colchester areas too that were more problematic. I'm going to share my screen. These are the two areas. This is what we're calling to the bottom right is Blakely Road, and to the upper left is West Lakeshore Drive. And there is a concern that these two by themselves do not meet. Some advisory recommendation is that this Blakely Road one, which includes the municipal complex here, could be inclusive of the elementary and middle school here, the high school here. There's a veterinary practice over in this vicinity, some other commercial properties here, and a park here, and the recreation center here, and it would make it a little bit more conducive in terms of a village area. Over here, one of the other thoughts was you could try and link the two of them together. Janet's concern was this would be a long and rather sort of linear village area to pull together, and advise that perhaps this corner might want to be transition infill instead of village. So that was the two areas. I'm happy to continue showing the map or zoom in or zoom out of any area. Kirsten.
So the one that's to the south of the Mallets Bay one, that's the one where there's the town clerk's office?
This is a municipal complex. It includes the municipal offices and also public works garage and police station.
Sarah, I think that as much as I agree with the ways that they could fix this, consistent with our earlier discussion, I think it'd be better to amend the narrative to explain why each of these areas is not consistent with the statutory definition of a village center. And for the Blakely Road one, for me, the biggest tripping point is that it does not include commerce. It is not the commercial center and is not a place where people gather for commercial economic activities. It's the municipal center with all those municipal facilities, but there's no restaurants, there's no shopping areas, it isn't that. And it's exceedingly small. So if I were to rework this a bit, I would put those facets into the narrative about the Blakely Road area and then say it's not consistent with the statutory definition. And for West Lakeshore Drive, the other one closer to the bay, yeah, I might take it from the other angle, that it doesn't contain civic assets that, are consistent with the statutory definition. And then, let the community figure out how they're going to fix that, whether they're going to change one to transition infill and the other they're going to expand, or they're going to try to merge them, rather than us telling them what to do, even though I think that suggestion's a pretty good one. But that's what I would do. More about why it doesn't work and let them figure out how to fix it.
Yeah, Sarah, can you share your text again?
Sure, things just froze for a minute. So if there's a slightly panicked look on my face for the draft, it's back though. So
Well, I've got that open too. If you'd
As
like
long as
me
you're
to.
hitting save along the way, Sarah, you're going to be okay.
yeah, let's do that right now. All right, well, I'm saving Brooke.
Yeah, I want to agree with everything Alex just said. And the other thing I just want to just query again, we don't, just as a rhetorical question, is this notion of whether historic buildings or properties need to exist or not. I'm unclear on that piece, so I want to try to figure that out in the next day. But yeah, everything Alex said, I echo.
I think on that front, if you have a chance to go back to last week when the board discussed it, and Kirsten, you might remember what day that was, and point Brooke in that direction. There was, I think, a good board discussion on that. But so what we'll do is just say provide additional information supporting the proposed Lakely Road and West Lakeshore Drive. And leave it at that. All right. Anything else on Colchester? Kirsten?
I just thought I'd touch on that, there's 5 village centers proposed, and it is in part a reflection of like the nature of Colchester, but just it's a lot of village centers, I guess, and I don't know how other board members feel about that, but and we don't have a criteria for that, right? Like, how many designated downtowns or how many village centers can a municipality have? But it's a lot.
Kirsten, I'll just say that as somebody who grew up around here, I and most people I know think that Colchester is pretty weird. Whenever growing up, people said like, "Okay, I'm headed to Colchester." It'd be like, "Wait, what do you mean? Are you going to St. Mike's? Are you going to 40th and Allen? Like, where are you talking about?" Colchester does have very distinct, gathering areas, village centers in this context. So I don't disagree with you that it's odd to have 5. But it's always been that way. At least in my tenure, it's always been that way. There've been very distinct locations.
And I know that there has been a lot of work on planning and trying to improve, but I think coming back to what Alex echoed earlier is the historic center of Colchester was Winooski until they divorced in the early 1900s. And so I think part of that, as you take a look at some of these areas and some of the history, is that sort of informs what you see today and how it's transpired, and how you had the village area had definitely mills, and the fort was a legacy National Register district. It had some of the Buffalo Soldiers stationed at it, very historic. You had the Bay also was Marble Islands, center of commerce along Lake Champlain. And then you had the Heinsberg Primrose area that, as things developed after IBM in the 1960s, also sort of took shape as being a commercial core within a residential suburban area. So you have, yes, a lot of things going on, but I appreciate the diligence on that, and hope that we can maybe get through the 2 Essexes before we wrap for the day. Does that sound like a plan?
The only thing I was going to add, Sarah, was that I think unless others are in a different place, the central bold underline that says the board cannot determine, I think I would propose we change that to say these 2 areas do not meet the requirements of a village center, or per your prior language are not consistent with. I don't think there's any question in my mind that they are not consistent with the definition of village center. If other board members feel like, well, maybe they are and they just need more information, that's fine. But for me, I'm like, nope, the way they're currently shown, they do not. They are not consistent.
So I think we said in Burlington cannot determine. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think I agree with Alex, but again, that Blakely Road explanation saying it doesn't have historic properties, to me, that's not why it's disqualified. I don't think. It's the commerce piece. Or business, traditional business.
Sarah, you can just put a pin in that and, you don't have to get the wording right now.
So we're saying that this does not meet.
Try again.
Is that correct? We're saying that this does not meet.
I think that would be better. And then if they can figure out a way to do it and come back with it in compliance, great.
And this is one too where I appreciate everybody's thoughts on this. Knowing how much Colchester has worked on planning, particularly for the West Lakeshore Drive area. There is a lot of good local planning behind this. Colchester is also one of those areas that has an official map. I think the advisory recommendations provide additional information. Perhaps they can do and support that, but I think that taking the harsher standpoint on this than Shelburne Road, if that's what the board wants to do, I just I will recognize that I see it through a different lens. So I will change. Is that what I'm hearing? Can I get like something from all three of you saying that you want this to be that it does not meet?
Could you leave it highlighted? Yeah, I think that's where I'm leaning, but again, I would like to, before Friday, get a better handle on the traditional historic business and civic center. That to me, I need to vote on this. I need a better handle on that, and I will do my utmost to get to that place. Because I want to make sure that our municipalities are treated equally and fairly, and so.
Sounds like
Not
we should move on,
positive.
Sarah.
My answer is not positive, Sarah, so just highlight it for us.
So we'll come back to it Friday.
Sounds like it.
If there's time, Essex, we're saying that this meets the requirements. And again, we're just saying about adding some depth to it. Everybody okay with Essex?
Can I just share my screen quick in terms of the add depth? Is that all right, Sarah?
Sure.
So yeah, is it sort of, where there's not a lot of depth? I mean, down in here, like what, I mean.
Kirsten, you're asking where is this depth going to be added?
Yeah,
right?
I guess I'm
Like,
just trying to, just in general,
I think what we're saying is between the two easterly legs right
so
now
here,
might be an area, but again, it's
Yeah.
advisory.
Yep.
And
okay.
consider adding depth, and that might be an area. Is that
Mm-hmm.
all right? Anything else on Essex, or are we okay on Essex? All right.
Okay, on Essex.
Heinsberg. We're saying that this also meets the requirements for a village center. Is everybody okay on that? Taylor?
Less about content. I just want to know that, Sarah, I might have a follow-up question for you and for Janet about the Heinsberg Town Plan and its adoption schedule and how that fits in with our regional schedule.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I will send that to you separately via email over the next couple days.
All right, thank you. Huntington, unless anybody has anything on Heinsberg. We're saying that there are 2 proposed village centers, and we're saying that both of those also meet the definition for a village center. Is everybody okay in Huntington? I'm seeing head nods.
I'm good.
All right. Jericho, there are 3 of them. South, west, and east. We're saying that all of them meet the requirements for a village center.
I'm good.
Do you want me to show them or we good?
No, I just can't scroll down. So let me just stop sharing for a minute and unfreeze my computer again.
I'm good with 3 in Jericho. Kirsten, Brooke, are you good? If so, we can keep moving once Sarah gets her screen back.
I'm good on the next few until we get to Shelburne.
Yes, I'm good on Jericho. It's almost entirely legacy anyway.
All right, I'm going to have it back. I'm going to share. Let me close out a few more things. Hang on.
It's frozen because it's trying to save.
Yep, I see that as well, Maddie. And the upper portion of the screen looks like it's saving.
Oh, you can actually see.
Where the
Okay.
file name is, there's a little thing that says saving ... after the file name.
Are any other board members in this right now? The Word doc?
No.
Not me, but Sarah, I'm happy to share the PDF version if you want, just to move us along.
Yeah, that would be, I mean, if you,
I have the
Cons-
PDF copy open,
all right, if
but
you
I don't
can
have
s-
the Word copy open. I don't know why.
Okay. So maybe it's just the server. So can you guys see my screen right now?
Yes.
Okay. So I will just continue on then because I think I can get through Milton at least. And we're saying that Milton meets the requirements of a village center. Unless anybody has.
Like Brooke, I have no issues with Milton or Richmond. It's Shelburne I want to get to.
Okay. So Shelburne. There are 2 village centers, the north and the south. And we're saying that both of these do not meet the definition for a village center. We had a structured required revisions map these areas and other future land use category. Happy to try and change that to advisory if you would so like. Any thoughts?
2 thoughts immediately. One, the conclusion says each of these areas does not meet requirements for a village center. I would just write neither of these areas. Sorry, just grammar or my version of grammar. And yeah, I don't think that the required revisions is necessary. I think the statement that they don't meet the requirements is sufficient, and it's up to the RPC and the municipality to come back with a solution.
Yeah, I agree with Alex. So instead of this, we're going to say provide additional information. Was that? But honestly, is there additional information that they could provide at this point, or do we just want to?
No, I was suggesting not having any advisory or required recommendations, just ending with neither of these areas meet the requirements for village center, and that's that.
Okay. Taylor.
Lots to talk about from my perspective, but I know we don't have much time. On the northern center, there is a mention of not being pedestrian oriented. Could you tell me more about that, please?
Kirsten, would you be willing to show your screen with the map?
Sure.
Thank you.
Hold on, let me just get it up again. I had it up. Oops. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes.
So, do you want me to zoom in on the northern one?
Please.
Yeah, it's quite small. Oh, can you see that?
Want to zoom in a little bit more?
Oh, sure.
Fantastic.
Is that too zoomed in?
No, that's, I think, pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Okay.
And so I think what was described here is there's a commercial complex to the northeast, a singular store, to the southeast, sort of a traditional like shopping center, and on the lower southwest, another commercial building, and on the northwest, I think there's a residence, and I'm blanking on what else there is. Maybe if you could turn on parcel lines. If it,
Right, but to speak to Taylor's specific question, the lack of a pedestrian orientation was not really my comment, so I'm not sure which board member sort of got this in here or if it was Sarah, combining them. But Taylor, isn't it kind of obvious? Like this village center is 100% focused on Route 7. Right? That's the center of the village center is multi-lane highway that is Route 7. And sure, there's sidewalks along Route 7, but the buildings are set back from the road. There are parking lots in front of the buildings. In every way possible, this is an auto-centric stretch of Shelburne Road. So yeah, it's not pedestrian oriented. That's how I would explain it.
Okay, no, that's helpful to understand. I think my pushback there being that, I think the standards. I want to bring back up the statute, but when we talk about centers, I mean it's mostly talking about uses. There isn't a lot about, from my perspective, about design here, and about pedestrian orientation. I understand that is a typical characteristic of a very traditional Vermont, historic from the 1800s center. But as I think this discussion today has shown, context is important in terms of history. The other thing that's slightly connected to that point that I just asked the board to consider is, Route 7 is a barrier. I get it, to connection across. I mean, in terms of pedestrians crossing it, and to making a cohesive place. Shelburne doesn't have a ton of control over that, and the 10,000 plus cars that go through it every day. And I just want to make sure that Shelburne's being treated fairly, and as compared to other village centers across the state that have state routes through them, that have a lot of traffic going through them, that may or may not have sidewalks even. And Shelburne does. Shelburne has crosswalks. And so I just, that rubs me a little bit the wrong way, that, you know, Shelburne in some ways is being penalized from a state route with high traffic it doesn't have a lot of control over. And it, you know, I think Shelburne is doing the best it can to get, you know, its town plan and zoning aligned to really develop nodes here. Are these the right shapes? I think we can talk about, but I did want to make that point about Route 7.
Yeah, and I appreciate the comment, Taylor. And again, I'll tell you, pedestrian orientation was not my recommendation for a comment in this particular section of the response letter. And I don't think it's mentioned in the 4348A description of a village or a downtown center, which seems to be much more focused on, you know, areas being the mixed use centers that bring together community economic activity and civic assets. And then there's the other sentence about traditional historic central business and civic centers. So my encouragement for you to pass along to Shelburne is this northerly one is not a mixed-use center bringing together community economic activity and civic assets. There are no civic assets, at least currently, and it's so small that although it might be a node that could be developed, right now it doesn't serve a traditional central business or civic function. It's a strip mall. It's a strip mall and a furniture sales store with parking lots out front, and then an undeveloped parcel on the other side of the road. Maybe someday in the future it will transition, but maybe it should be transition right now, because that's what it looks like to me.
Kirsten, could you go to the southern one? I just wanted to be able to view that one again.
I know we're close to time, and I don't, you know, I don't want to suck up the time the board has to discuss, but I hear you, Alex, on the northern one. There was discussion at the December 1st meeting about even making it bigger to include some historic properties, or the, you know, the CHT Bay Ridge property. You know, I think in discussing the draft letter with Shelburne staff, at least, you know, the northern one is probably of less importance to the town. I think this relates to Village Center South Burlington, we'll talk about next, and maybe that one getting bigger. Maybe the northern area can just be PGA. It's better connected to South Burlington anyways. The southern one here, this Rice Lumber property, is definitely the town's priority in terms of having it be a center. It's connected via sidewalk to the traditional center to the south. You know, it's an auto-oriented historic structure, but the Dutch mill there is historic. It's on the state register. And there, you know, there isn't a civic asset, but there is a municipally owned parcel here that's planned for a fire station. A lot of plans. I've heard what the board has had to say about plans, and not, you know, not things being on the ground yet. But, you know, is the board open to, you know, this center being connected at all to the center to the south? Are we getting too linear? Do you have thoughts on that?
Hey, Taylor, can you repeat? I didn't quite understand what you said about the municipal parcel. Was that in the,
Yeah.
That's on the southern section on the right?
It's right, actually, sorry, I guess I should say the middle center. We've got three centers, right? So the Rice Lumber Center you were actually just zoomed in on. There is a parcel in there that is municipally owned, that is planned for a fire station.
Not the downtown, but the
Can I go
village
back
center.
there in a second? But can I jump in?
Kirsten,
Okay, thank you. So this Shelburne Farms property is what is being flagged for removal from the designated downtown, and Taylor has indicated that
Shelburne
there's
Museum.
Shelburne
Sorry.
Museum, I mean, Shelburne
Yep.
Farms, Shelburne Museum. Thank you. Taylor has previously indicated that there's concurrence, that's warranted. And so with respect to his question of, could they be merged? I think, I'm open to discussing that now if that's helpful. Recognizing that, there will be a lot of the sort of more linear aspect to the downtown eliminated with that parcel removal. So sorry for if I'm making you dizzy. I'll just hold the screen right there.
And so I think one of the things that we've tried to do sort of uniformly is, I think where we began the day, which was trying to be helpful and give prescriptive guidance, we've pulled back from that and said, give us more information. And so I think that if Shelburne wants to make that case, they could come back to us with additional information. But I don't think that for the board to consider possible options that haven't actually been formally presented to us, is something that I would sort of try and
Yeah.
protect against at this point. I think that if you take a look at, there is a significant portion of rural there for that corridor
Yeah.
that separates, that would be hard to sort of
Yeah.
overcome, and that they perhaps are two distinctive areas. And so I think there are some challenges there. But again, they can provide that additional information to us. I think this center, just to speak to it myself, is I can absolutely understand. I think of the two centers, this is the area that perhaps had more going for it, with some sort of potential historic piece to it. You had the old Jelly Mill Commons too, that are right there, that are now, I think there's a restaurant in there and some other shops, walkable area. Again, not really sure in terms of what there is for civic, but I think this might be one that there could be some additional information provided. I don't want to try and project what that would be, or what the appropriate solution is for that. But happy to hear other thoughts. Taylor.
No, I'll just note that, I want to provide that additional information. It's hard, given that I can't really provide that to you until May. That is what it is. It's fine. There is a childcare center in that in that middle center as well. I don't know if we consider that a civic asset or not. There's also a dentist office.
Oh, can I just,
Kirsten, I'm gonna
Yeah.
wait, and we haven't heard from Brooke yet. If I can hear from Brooke first.
Oh, I just had just one quick question, then a comment. I'm just curious. I'm trying to look at the 1,000-foot scale on this map. How far apart are these two? Is it like half a mile, maybe? Something like that?
Kirsten,
Probably a little
can you
bit
measure
more.
that?
Okay. I was just trying to get sort of a scale to this. And Taylor, the other thing that I would just tell you in terms of my reaction, this, the historic center of Shelburne, I'm not sure that's necessary. That to me is not holding me back from saying that this would be in compliance. So more information about the civic assets, I think, would be great. So I hear what you're saying, and I think this is another pin, Sarah, I hate to say, that I need to contemplate a little bit more.
We keep on dropping pins. We're not going to have substantial time and bandwidth to come back to a lot of these and revisit them. I think this is part of the whole pre-application process, though, is to say, we're not quite sure. Please provide us more information. Or, yep, you're on the right track. I think we're doing a good job at getting through that today. So I would like to, we are a little bit past time, but Kirsten, why don't you go, and then I'll say what I have to say.
I just want to make sure, Brooke, that you can see that it's half a mile. And I agree with the conclusion of, I don't have the Word document up in front of me, but, does not meet requirements for the northern village center in Shelburne. And for this one that's closer to the designated downtown, that we could say, require more information. Oh, and I just wanted to respond to a little bit of what I just heard Taylor say is, I think earlier in today's meeting, Sarah had indicated that we as a board are figuring out how and how we might be able to provide supplemental feedback before May. So that still remains a possibility. And we're getting our bearings on that as well. So
Don't fault you for that. I totally understand. Thank you for that.
yeah.
All right, so just want to take stock of where we're at for the day. We have South Burlington, St. George, Underhill, Westford, and Williston yet to get through on village centers. What's the pleasure of the board? And let me check in with our staff and see. Maddie, if we continue to 4 o'clock, is that okay?
I'll be here until you adjourn.
Well, thank you, and hopefully that's in the foreseeable future, but would any of the other board members be adverse to continuing on to 4 and trying to get through the rest of the village centers?
Happy to keep going.
Okay, by me.
All right, I'm going to take that as license to proceed. Taylor,
Is it possible to do the easy ones first and then maybe do South Burlington on Friday?
we'll skip over South Burlington and we'll see if there are any easy ones. How about that? Let's go to St. George. We're saying that it meets it, but we're giving an advisory recommendation saying that the mobile home park is actually within the rural zoning district, and we just would like a little bit more information about how that's going to be included. And then parcels proposed to be surrounding the village might want to give some depth to it. So, and that's just advisory. Is that all right with everybody? Seeing one head nod.
Works for me.
Okay, I'm going to keep going. Underhill. We're saying that there are 2, east and west, and both meet the requirements for village center. Is everybody okay with Underhill? I'm seeing head nods. All right, and then we start to increase in difficulty to Westford. We're saying that it meets it, but our advisory one, there's a little jug handle that's surrounded by a flood hazard area, and it looks largely undeveloped, and we're saying that maybe that would want to be removed from the village center. Because it's sort of jug handled by flood hazard and river corridor. Just consider it. Is that okay with everybody? I'm seeing a head nod.
I'm the one who suggested the jug handle issue, so I'm okay with that.
Okay. Kirsten, you're remaining quiet, and I'm not seeing you on camera, so just speak up if you have something, but otherwise I'm going to go on to Williston.
We pause here for just a moment.
Sure.
So, I'm seeing, flood hazard, like that the proposed village center area does not extend further into flood hazard areas beyond legacy designation. Are you seeing something different, Alex, or others?
Could you share your screen, Kirsten,
Sure.
with the map?
Yep.
See that bottom right-hand corner?
Mhm. So can everyone see the legacy and the proposed designation? And I'm turning flood hazard, which is the red, on and off. Whoops.
Yes. So the jug handle on the lower right, Kirsten, is not in the legacy area, but is proposed for Village Center, and the bulk of it is flood hazard area, which is why the advisory recommendation
Oh,
is
okay,
saying take it
yeah.
out.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, I think I've been staring at these maps too long. I agree. I think that we shouldn't. And same thing, well, river corridor. Yep, it's the same issue, really. Um,
All right, I'm going to, we're good on Westford. Going to try and get through Williston.
thank you.
And again, we're saying that it meets it. And there is, to the very south of it, there's a solar field, which is owned by the municipality, which is a rural conservation piece. And again, we're just saying you could actually consider that being part of the village center. It's municipally owned, even parks get included. So, I think we're fine with that. Is everybody okay? We'd sort of touched upon that historic village area of Williston earlier, but any comments on Williston? Brooke,
I'm good with
you're
that.
muted. But I saw you talking.
Sorry, I had a phone call and I was telling them I couldn't talk.
Oh, okay. I just want to
Sorry
make
about
sure
that.
that if you had something. It's when I'm in presenter mode, it sort of comes and goes who I get to see. And I saw that you were there and you were talking. And all right. So for okay on Williston, I'm going to actually scroll back up to South Burlington and just see if we might be able to get through at least maybe one of the 3 village centers in South Burlington before we adjourn. Because you guys are going strong and I think we can finish strong. So, South Burlington, you have 3 proposed. And again, I think there was some discussion at the pre-application meeting about these. There's 2 on Shelburne Road and then 1 at the intersection of Kimball and Kennedy. Kimball and Kennedy will take first. And this is in Kirsten, if you might have the map up and ready to go in the background here. This is an area that has some undeveloped areas and doesn't necessarily have all these features right now. And so we're just saying doesn't meet it at this time. And then the 2 on Shelburne Road, we also have some issues with. There's sort of the southern one, which we're saying we can't determine that it meets it. There's some things that it could pull in, some historic areas at Queen City Park. There's Samansky Park that could be pulled into. And then the northern one, we're saying that it doesn't meet it at this time. So I don't know if maybe Kirsten, you could show the Kimball Ave one at this point. I'll stop sharing. What are folks' thoughts on this? Taylor.
Yeah. Board, interrupt me if you would rather talk than hear me talk. But I think we disagree. That's fine. That's okay. I think our concern is about the connection between a center and the surrounding PGA. And so, when we talked about the downtown center at City Center, we did talk about expansion of that as an advisory comment to the south to include some, the school property, the fire station property. We just kind of wonder if that downtown center should also be kind of expanded towards Heinsberg Road to kind of compensate for the loss of this and the loss of this center in terms of being, walkable to the surrounding PGA. I didn't know if the board had comments on that or if we don't want to advise on theoreticals, but That's our concern is losing this. We lose our anchor to surrounding PGA, and we're wondering, should we expand the downtown center?
So I think
Yes.
one of the comments that we had was to expand the downtown center, for South Burlington.
Yeah, how much, I guess, is our question. It's like, to the south civic properties does make sense, but it's like, does that neighborhood on Heinsberg Road, do we bring that in too? Do we get a little bit more square like? They're in different land use categories locally, different zoning districts.
Taylor, honestly, I think South Burlington and its PGAs has a much bigger issue than just whether this village center exists or not. There are so many areas that are mapped as PGAs south of Interstate 89 that are very distant from either the downtown or a village center. I'm not convinced that the Kimball Ave Village Center just going away and becoming PGA is going to make much difference in terms of that concern that you're expressing in terms of having anchors in the appropriate places. And we've already talked about the downtown, so I don't really want to go back there, but I for one, am fine with, making it larger. But with regard to this Kimball Ave Village Center, I just don't see it. It's very similar to, some of the conversation we had for the Cambrian Rise and the Southern Burlington downtown centers. Like these are visions of the future that don't exist today. And even though this is a future land use map, it's hard for me to conclude that the Kimball Ave area is, a center that is the economic and civic draw, for this part of South Burlington. Just doesn't seem like it is to me right now. It's a drive-through place. It's a place that you go to get somewhere else. It's not a destination, and maybe it will be in 10 years or whenever. But I'm having a hard time concluding that this meets the 4348A requirements for a village center.
So I think one of the other things I'll say, and then maybe we can zoom into the northern area of Shelburne Road in South Burlington, is with PGAs, one of the things that I think the board's worked through is to not hold or required half a mile or a quarter of a mile, as long as there's pedestrian infrastructure too. So in terms of that sort of walkability factor from connection to the downtown to some of these other village areas, PGAs, is as long as there's good pedestrian connectivity, is we've been a bit expansive on that. So, but to be continued, I think some of this conversation will also take place under the PGA area. So Kirsten, could you zoom to the one on Shelburne Road?
Mm-hmm. While I'm doing that, I'll just remark that I think we've also discussed having a board conversation just in general, not specific to any particular RPC, about walkable distance, walkability, what's meant by that as we're, implementing this. So can you see that? Sure you
Yep.
can.
And so
Want to go to the
that's
northern one? Zoom into
Yeah.
the northern one?
You want to zoom in?
Sure. Is that good?
Yes. And so on the Burlington one, we're saying also sort of the same thing. We're saying, I think we said can't determine. So I don't know if we want to soften the language here to also say can't determine, or what are your thoughts on this northern area?
Wait,
I would like to soften the language. I do think that this has the potential for being a village center. but it's a difficult one. And it's conjoined with the Burlington Village Center, right? So there's some synergy going on across the municipal lines.
Yep. I'll share my screen, Kirsten, if
Okay.
so. I think what we have here is we're saying the board cannot determine on that one, and on Kimball and Kennedy, we're saying it does not meet. Do you want to take a quick look at the south one, Brooke?
Just have a question. Is there any way to treat these in combination between the two municipalities? Would that in any way assist? I mean, there's nothing in the statute that suggests we could do such a thing, but
So I'd say what's not, because in Rutland, I think we had one that spanned over the municipal boundary and treated them both separately. I agree in terms of synergy, but just the way that we've treated them is to treat them as separate municipalities. Taylor.
I'll start on Farrell and bring us down here to Fayette. You know, just in terms of Farrell, Farrell Street, the Northern Village Center in South Burlington. You know, this is a place that received a Smart Growth Award back in the early 2000s as being a walkable mixed-use place. Specifically, the part of the development behind the shopping center, those apartments that went in. You know, this was the peak of what we were doing 20 years ago. It's pretty smart growthy. So to hear that it doesn't meet the requirements is a little tough to hear. I hear that, you know, having a greater mix of uses could help. We'll talk to South Burlington about that. Certainly the priority between these two centers in South Burlington, at least talking to staff, is the Fayette Drive, the Southern Center. The Southern Center is a place that we have recently talked to staff about in terms of doing a neighborhood plan for in the next fiscal year. We appreciate the board's advisory recommendations about expansion in terms of inclusion of additional civic assets and historic properties. And the city, you know, seems very open to those suggestions. So we hope to provide more information whenever we can about this particular center.
Yeah, and Taylor, I do think that if the southern one passes muster with us or is expanded and all those good ideas, the proximity to the northern one is such that having the northern one be planned growth area, you know, you've got a tight enough, close enough linkage that it all hangs together. But I continue to think that the Farrell Street one is worth, you know, getting more information about. And as much as our memo or response letter is going to be segregated by municipality, I do think that that there is synergy between the Burlington side of Route 7 and the South Burlington side, particularly with regard to the civic assets on the Burlington side that don't exist on the South Burlington side, and taken together might pass muster. Even though there's a really heavy grocery store angle and major parking lot footprint going on that occupies, you know, 10% or more of this whole village center.
So anybody has any, I'd like to just, we're getting close on time. I'm going to go back to the actual wording here. What we did was we softened the language for the North Shelburne Road one to be very comparable to the South. We took out the required revision, and our advisory recommendations are to expand the Northern Village to include Rice Memorial High School, CAX, and along Drive, and expand the Southern Village to include Say Park and other potential historic sites, as well as Samansky Park. So giving them some ideas. But again, I think what we did with these Shelburne Road ones was we softened the language a bit. Would anybody else like to see additional modifications? Kirsten?
So based on our prior conversations for other municipal designation areas, I'm understanding that we're going to leave in, the wording advisory recommendations, or perhaps Brooke will be able to develop something better, but I think you should have the word like consider expanding, because it just sounds more explicitly like almost like a requirement without the word, consider. But and I'm comfortable with where we've landed here.
Can I get Alex? How are you feeling?
Good, thanks. Comfortable.
Brooke? Thank you.
Can you just go up to the top of the, okay, whoops, South Burlington, where it starts? Yeah, here it is. Yeah. Yep, thanks. I'm good.
All right. So congratulations. I think we made it all the way to PGAs. I think what my homework is, if I have the opportunity to catch up with Jenny and Brooke, not Jenny, Rebecca and Brooke, at some point tomorrow, on some of the language, we'll try and accommodate that before Friday's meeting. Or at least a discussion around that. I'm not making any promises, but I think that's something I'd like to try and do. And then we'll resume with planned growth areas on Friday. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes, sounds good. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second. Oh.
All those in favor? Aye.
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 All right. I think that's 4 ayes. We have it. We're adjourned. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you Friday.
Thank you.
I